Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world that smells of coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of bread you can't quite afford. You're standing on a cobbled street in a Victorian city, the air thick as soup, your breath turning gray under the gas lamps. Somewhere, a clock strikes 6, though it's hard to tell if it's morning or evening through the haze. You probably won't survive this century unless you're lucky, or very small and fast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cobblestones under your boots are slick from last night's rain, and the gutters bubble with a mixture of runoff and ash. You look up, rows of houses, narrow and tall, each packed with families stacked like library books. The city wakes slowly. A factory whistle, a cart's squeal, the sharp scent of horse dung cut by baking bread. There's the first joke of the night. You can always tell a Victorian city by how it smells like everything at once. You pass a woman sweeping her doorstep with more pride than energy. Her broom bristles are worn thin, her sleeves gray at the cuffs. Upstairs, laundry sags between windows, fluttering in a half-hearted breeze that can't quite shake the grime. These are the breathing lungs of industry. Leeds, Manchester, London, take your pick. Every brick was laid with soot and sweat. You notice children everywhere, barefoot, shawled, busy. One boy carries a pail half his size. Another drags a sack of rags. A girl stoops to pick cinders from the street. This is childhood, where playtime means finding something that didn't belong to someone else first. Historians still argue whether city life improved or poisoned opportunity during the Industrial Revolution, but the evidence underfoot feels pretty grimy. The first mainstream fact to anchor you: by the mid-1800s, nearly 1 in 5 children in Britain worked full-time jobs. Some began at 5, others earlier, if their fingers could tie knots or pull threads. Childhood was measured in height against the machines. As you walk, you cross into a market square. Stalls grown with onions, fish, scraps of fabric. The air is sharp. Vinegar, sweat, and coal, tar soap. You watch a woman dipping cotton into a barrel of blue rinse, trying to fake the freshness of white cloth for resale. A man with one eye hawks matches in a hoarse sing-song. It's easy to see how stories were traded faster than coins here. To your left, a church bell tolls. You follow it, stepping into a narrow lane where the buildings lean toward each other, as if whispering secrets. A cart rattles by, its driver half asleep, his child nodding beside him. The boy's head bobs like a lantern on a string. Somewhere, a baby cries, muffled by stone and distance. You glance down an alley and freeze. 2 boys crouch by a drain, teasing out scraps of metal with sticks. "Copper fetches 2pence," one mutters. The other just grins, teeth bright against soot. They're scavengers, mudlarks technically. That's your quirky fact tonight. Mudlarking was a legitimate, if disgusting, job, where kids waded through the Thames at low tide to find nails, coins, or bones to sell. Romanticized now, sure, but back then it smelled like death and sewage. A cloud drifts overhead, and for a moment, the dim light feels almost kind. But then a steam whistle splits the calm again, echoing from the mills by the river. You can almost feel the ground hum. The adults quicken their pace. The children vanish like smoke into courtyards and doors. Morning has begun, and with it, the daily machine. You turn a corner and find yourself near the river docks. Cranes creak, barges moan under cargo. The water looks thick enough to chew. A clerk with ink-stained fingers shouts at a delivery boy. The boy shrinks back, mutters, "Sorry, sir," though it's hard to tell what he's done wrong. It doesn't matter. Here, tone matters more than truth. The fog thickens. Your boots squelch in the mud. Every so often the glow of a gas lamp catches on a sign. Mangle House, Bone Mill, Rag Dealer. The names are half poetry, half threat. You realize how industrial progress depended on breaking things down. Fabric into fiber, bones into glue, bodies into labor. A group of girls hurry past you, hair tucked under shawls, aprons tied over dresses. They look about 10, maybe 12. You hear one say, "If I'm late again, I'll get the strap." Her friend laughs softly, though it sounds more like a cough. Ahead, smoke drifts from the tall chimneys, the beating heart of the city. You pause to catch your breath, and your eyes catch a poster on a wall. It's half torn, words faint beneath the soot. Temperance meeting, for the betterment of working families. Some noble idea, sure. But as a rat scuttles across your shoe, you can't help smiling. Maybe the betterment should start with fewer rats. Your stomach growls. Breakfast, if you're lucky, means bread spread with dripping, animal fat saved from last night's roast. Someone else's roast, mind you. You chew in your mind the way a starving person tastes memory. Somewhere, a baker's boy passes with trays on his head, steaming loaves wrapped in linen. The smell alone feels like a promise. The streets grow louder as carts fill them, voices rising. You slip into the crowd, trying to keep pace. For all its misery, the city pulses with rhythm. Horses clop, gears turn, bells mark hours. There's music in the repetition, though it's mostly the tune of survival. Historians still argue whether industrial Britain's pollution directly shortened lives or merely worsened the ones already short, but you can taste the answer in your lungs. Soot dusts your collar, your throat burns faintly. The Victorians called it fog, but you know better. It's coal wearing perfume. At the corner of a factory yard, you spot a mural. Children's handprints in faded paint. Maybe a charity effort. Maybe just mischief. The contrast hits hard. Tiny marks against endless brick. You trace one with your finger, and the wall feels warm, alive with stored heat from the furnaces beyond. You step back into the street. A woman sells roasted chestnuts, and for a moment the smell is almost festive. A boy nearby hums a tune, something like a lullaby. You catch the words, "When I am big, I'll ride the train." He'll probably shovel coal for it instead. Still, hope is the cheapest luxury, and everyone here can afford at least a scrap. As daylight strengthens, shadows sharpen. The city's outline emerges. Factories, warehouses, rows of tenements stretching like ribs. You feel small, but you keep walking, because that's what everyone does. Walk, work, endure. And beneath the smoke, somewhere, the day truly begins. The whistle hits your ears like a blade of noise, sharp and cold, slicing through the mist. You jolt awake. It's not your alarm, though it might as well be. The factory calls, and sleep is a luxury you left behind with your last clean shirt. The air smells of oil and smoke. Your stomach grumbles. You grab a heel of bread, chew, and start walking. There's no time for breakfast if you want to keep your job. Your boots slap against the cobbles as other shapes emerge from the fog. Tiny figures with bent shoulders, trudging in silence. You're one of them now, a child of the machine age. Around you, the city seems alive with metal lungs. Every few yards, A chimney exhales. Every few minutes, someone coughs. Welcome to the factory floor, where the hum of gears replaces the sound of birds and daylight filters in like a rumor. You pass through an iron gate that moans on its hinges. Inside, the yard smells like scorched cloth and wet rope. A man with a watch chain as fat as your thumb stands by the door, ticking names off a ledger. He doesn't look up when you enter. His hands are clean, which is how you know he's in charge. The first mainstream fact tonight. During the mid-1800s, British textile mills employed tens of thousands of children, some as young as 5, to crawl beneath spinning frames, tie broken threads, and sweep cotton dust. Their small hands and quick reflexes made them perfect for the job. Their small voices made them easy to ignore. You shuffle inside. The heat hits first, then the noise. It's not a sound, it's an environment. Hundreds of machines clack, hiss, and whine, each one louder than the last. The air itself seems to vibrate. Within minutes, your ears ring like struck bells. You mouth words to the boy beside you, but he can't hear. He grins anyway. His teeth are rimmed gray from the cotton dust that never quite leaves the lungs. You take your station next to a spinning mule, a giant contraption that turns raw cotton into thread. The wheels blur, the spindles blur, even your thoughts blur. You reach in to catch a snapped thread, fingers trembling. One mistake could mean blood on the floor. There's your first light joke of the hour. Congratulations, you've just been promoted to dangerously underpaid speed accessory. Try putting that on a resume. The overseer paces behind you, his boots shine, and his temper doesn't. He carries a strap, mostly for show, but you've seen it kiss skin before. You work faster. The rhythm takes over. Reach, twist, tie, duck, repeat. Time melts into motion. The windows are high, grimy, unreachable, so you count the hours by the ache in your back. Historians still argue whether the Industrial Revolution truly raised living standards or just changed the shape of misery. For children like you, the question feels moot. You're paid in halfpennies and exhaustion. When you go home, you smell like the factory's breath. Around mid-morning, a boy 2 stations down lets out a yelp. His sleeve has caught in the rollers. Everything stops, except the machine, which doesn't care. The overseer pulls a lever, too late. The boy's arm comes away bleeding, skin scored by gears. The others look away. There's no ambulance, just a rag, a bucket, and a muttered curse. Tomorrow, someone else will stand in his place. Here's a quirky fact to keep your thoughts from sinking too deep. Some mills employed scavengers, whose sole job was to crawl under machines to collect fallen cotton while they were still running. It saved time, and fingers were cheaper than downtime. You wipe sweat from your brow, but it just makes you dirtier. A girl near the wall sneezes, then sneezes again. She's been doing that all week. They call it mill fever, caused by inhaling cotton fibers. Doctors now know it's buccinosis, a lung disease. Back then it was just bad air. If you were lucky, you outgrew it. If not, you simply stopped showing up. At noon, the machine's slow. Not stop, mind you, slow. You have 20 minutes to eat. You sit on a crate, unwrap your bread, and stare at the others. Everyone chews like it's their first meal in days. Maybe it is. The bread's dry, but you dunk it in your tea pretending it's soup. Across from you, a girl hums through her crumbs, a tune without words, something borrowed from the street outside. You glance up at the rafters. They drip with condensation and oil. The floor beneath you quivers faintly with the motion of the looms. Somewhere, a cat prowls, catching rats that fatten on spilled grain and dust. That's another small mercy. Cats were practically employees here, often named and half worshipped by the workers, because if the cats left, the rats would eat the cotton and maybe your lunch. The whistle blows again and your brief illusion of rest breaks. Back to work. You sigh, stretch your fingers, and return to the rhythm. Reach, twist, tie. The air grows thicker as the afternoon drags on. The oil lamps flicker, smearing shadows across the walls. You wonder if anyone outside knows what this sounds like, feels like. The heartbeat of industry pounding through your bones. By late day, your body has learned the pattern better than your mind. You could work in your sleep, and some kids practically do, eyes half closed, hands still moving. One boy has tied so many threads, his fingers move even when he's resting, twitching in dreams. You think of the stories adults tell, that hard work builds character, that good children help their families, but the truth is simpler. Work builds hunger, and hunger builds silence. You stop thinking about tomorrow because it looks exactly like today. Still, you find your moments. When the overseer turns his back, you trade a wink with the girl at the carding machine. She grins, flicks a cotton puff at you. It drifts through the air like snow before dissolving in the heat. You both laugh, quietly, but it's laughter all the same. Sometimes survival sounds like that. The whistle screams one last time, long and low, like the factory itself, sighing in relief. The machines wind down, the echo lingering even after the silence returns. Your ears ring. Your arms feel like rope. You shuffle out with the others, blinking at the weak evening light. Outside, the city greets you with the same gray breath it exhaled this morning. You've been inside for 12 hours. Your pay fits in your palm. A few coins, warm from your skin. You think about bread, maybe a potato, maybe nothing at all. As you walk, you pass new arrivals, night workers, older children, mostly boys. Their eyes look hollow but awake. The factory doesn't sleep, it just changes shifts. You nod to one and he nods back. No words, just an understanding. The soot has settled on your clothes, your face, your lungs. You cough once, twice. It tastes like iron and salt. Somewhere behind you, another whistle blows. Another factory, another beginning. You don't even turn. The street is quieter now. You head home, tired, but not entirely hopeless. Tomorrow, maybe the machines will break and you'll get a day off. Or maybe not. But tonight, you've survived. And in this world, that's no small feat. You wake before the sun, though wake might be generous. It's more like you notice your body again, heavy and sore. The air in your room tastes of dust and damp plaster. Someone's already banging on the door downstairs. Your turn for the mine today. The thought makes your stomach drop like a stone. But you move anyway. You always do. You pull on your rough trousers, threadbare shirt, and a cap that used to be blue. The lampman's outside, handing out small tin lanterns with weak flames. Yours sputters like it might go out before you even get there. Perfect. You tuck it into your belt and join the other children shuffling down the lane. Their faces are gray even before the cold dust gets to them. The pit head looms ahead, a black skeleton against the morning. The wooden winding frame creaks as the cage rises, dripping condensation. A foreman shouts names, ticks boxes, waves you forward. The ground shakes faintly from somewhere below. You climb into the cage, heart thudding. Down you go, into the earth's throat. Here's your first mainstream fact of the night. By the 1840s, tens of thousands of British children worked in coal mines, some as young as 4. They hauled tubs, opened ventilation doors, and crawled through passages barely wide enough for their shoulders. The 1842 Mines Act eventually banned girls and very young boys from underground work, but enforcement came later, and poverty always found a loophole. The cage jerks, drops, and your stomach flips. The light above fades to a pinprick. You grip the bars, knuckles white. The air grows thicker, warmer. The hiss of the rope becomes a steady moan. You feel the descent in your ears as much as your bones. When the cage stops, it's not quiet. It's different. A muffled hum of picks, shovels, and boots on wet stone. Lamps flicker along a tunnel, throwing shadows that move like creatures. You step out and instantly smell it. Coal dust, sweat, and oil mixed into one steady stench. A man hands you a chain and points to a tunnel mouth. "You're a trapper," he says. "Keep the door shut till you hear a cart." You nod, though you barely understand. He waves you off. You trudge down the passage, ducking low until the ceiling brushes your back. The door is a slab of wood that seals airflow between shafts. It's your job to open it when ponies or miners pass, then close it again to keep the air circulating. If you fall asleep, everyone could suffocate. No pressure. You sit on a rock, knees pulled up, the door creaking behind you. The darkness feels alive, breathing, shifting. You hold your lamp close, but its circle of light barely touches your boots. Minutes stretch like rope. You listen for footsteps, for the creak of wheels. Nothing. Just your own heartbeat and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. Here's your first light joke. Congratulations. You've been promoted again, this time to professional door sitter in total darkness. The pay? About a loaf of bread a week and a cough you'll never shake. Eventually, a faint rumble approaches. You spring up, pull the door open. A pony and a small boy appear, dragging a coal tub. Both look exhausted. Both stare straight ahead. The boy nods once, and then they vanish into the next gallery. You close the door again, sealing yourself back into the dark. Historians still argue whether child miners' endurance came from necessity or numbness. Some letters suggest the kids sang songs to stay awake. Others describe them sitting silent for hours, afraid to waste their candles. Either way, you realize that time moves differently underground. It loops, folds, stretches. Your quirky fact tonight: many pits used canaries as early gas detectors, but before that, some miners carried mice or even candles tied to sticks. If the flame flickered out, you didn't linger. The canary tradition began later, but the logic was the same. Better the bird than the boy. After hours of opening and closing, your lamp sputters low. You nibble at a crust of bread, sip lukewarm tea from a tin. The taste is half iron, half soot. You wonder what the sky looks like now. But you can't even imagine blue. The walls press close, warm and damp. Sometimes you swear you hear whispers in the rock, a trick of air or your tired brain. A tremor shakes dust from the ceiling. You flinch. Somewhere deeper, a dull boom. "Blast shot," someone calls faintly. Your heart slows. Routine. But you know explosions sometimes bring down whole seams. The men joke about bad luck shifts, though you can see the truth in their eyes. Fear's just another tool, like the pick or the shovel. When a miner passes later, he hands you a lump of coal shaped like a heart. "For your mum," he grins. You turn it in your hands. It shines faintly under the lamp, slick as tar. You tuck it into your pocket. A strange kind of beauty lives down here, black and quiet. Hours slide by. The rhythm returns. Open, close, wait. Sometimes you hum a tune to yourself, the one your sister used to sing when you were both small enough to share a bed. You picture her face, probably still sleeping up top, or maybe not. Maybe she's in the mill or the laundry or the kitchen of some grand house. Work divides families as neatly as walls. When the end of the shift finally comes, you hear it before you see it. A chorus of boots, laughter, shouts. Out, lads, out! You stumble toward the main shaft, blinking in the glow of dozens of lamps. The air feels thicker, as if it's been used too many times. The cage waits, ropes creaking, ready to lift you back into light. The ascent feels longer than the descent. Your legs tremble, your ears pop, your heart climbs faster than the cage. When the first streak of daylight appears, it feels unreal. The sky looks enormous, obscene in its brightness. You blink, squint, and breathe. The air tastes clean but strange. Above ground, the pit yard bustles. Men wash their faces in basins. Children cough up black phlegm. A horse snorts, shaking dust from its mane. The foreman stands with his ledger again, calling out names. You hand in your lamp, nod, and step away. On the road home, you kick a stone just to hear a sound that isn't mechanical. Your muscles ache, your lungs sting, but the fresh air feels like a gift you earned. You glance down at your hands. They're black to the wrists, the lines filled with coal. You wipe them on your trousers, but the stains stay. Down here, dirt is memory. Historians still argue whether child labor reforms actually improved miners' lives or just moved misery elsewhere, to factories, streets, or kitchens. Maybe both. You can't answer. You just keep walking. But you do know one thing. Once you've seen the dark that deep, the night above ground never seems as scary. You reach the edge of town as lamps begin to glow in windows. Smoke curls upward, soft and gray. For a moment, you imagine all those chimneys whispering secrets to each other about the world below. You smile, tired and knowing. Tomorrow, you'll be back underground. But for now, you can see the sky, and that's enough. The morning smells faintly of soot and cold porridge. You're smaller than your shadow and already late. Your employer, if you can call him that, owns half the chimneys in this district, which is a strange thing for any man to claim. But then again, this is Victorian England, where ownership extends to air, sweat, and the occasional terrified child. You tug your cap lower, clutch your bundle of brushes and scrapers, and follow the master sweep down the lane. He walks fast, his boots striking sparks from the cobblestones. Keep up, lad, he barks without turning. You try. The brushes clatter against your back, the soot bag bumps your knees. Another boy, maybe 8 years old, shoots you a sympathetic glance. You both know what's coming. By the time you reach the first house, your breath fogs the glass of the front door. The lady of the house greets the master sweep with polite disgust. Be quick, she says. The drawing room's quite intolerable with that draft. Then she retreats, her perfume struggling to outmatch the stench of burnt coal. The master sweep turns to you and the others. Right, you, he says, pointing at the narrowest chimney flue. Up you go. And that's how your day begins, feet bare. Shirt thin, climbing into darkness narrower than your own shoulders. Here's your mainstream fact. From the late 1700s through the early 1800s, child chimney sweeps, often as young as 6, were common across Britain. They climbed flues to scrape soot from the inside, often naked or nearly so to keep from snagging on the bricks. despite the 1834 Chimney Sweepers Act, exploitation continued for decades. You kneel at the hearth, staring up at a hole so black it feels alive. Don't dawdle, the master warns. Customers don't like waiting. You swallow hard and start your climb. The first few feet are easy. The bricks are cool. Then the space narrows, the heat rises, and soot begins to coat your skin. You push with your knees and elbows, inch by inch. The air turns thick, heavy with ash. Each breath scratches your throat like sandpaper. Your lamp flickers, barely any air up here. You squeeze through a bend, scraping your ribs. The chimney hums with the echo of the fire below, a dull warmth that creeps closer the higher you go. Joke number 1. You realize you're basically the world's least glamorous magician, disappearing up a hole, reappearing hours later covered in black glitter and regret. Somewhere below, the master calls, "Keep going, nearly there," which is something he says whether it's true or not. You cough, your voice swallowed by soot. The ceiling above you curves toward a junction. You twist your shoulders, stretch your arm, and scrape the last bit of crusted tar loose. It falls down, coating your hair in powder. Historians still argue whether masters genuinely believed the climb strengthened their boys, or simply found the justification convenient. The records show both kinds existed, those who fed and housed their apprentices decently, and those who treated them worse than the chimneys they cleaned. You start your descent. The trick is not to slide, fall too fast, and you'll end up like poor Tom from Clerkenwell, who broke his neck halfway down. You go slow, careful, soot raining around you like black snow. When your feet hit the hearth, you gasp and stumble out into daylight, blinking. The lady of the house wrinkles her nose. You've made a dreadful mess. The master bows slightly. Part of the process, ma'am. You and the other boys sweep up the fallen soot into sacks. The master sells it later to gardeners. It makes fine fertilizer. Nothing goes to waste, not even what nearly killed you. A quirky fact for your troubles: soot, mixed with animal fat, was sometimes used as a cheap shoe polish, or, in one grim irony, as a homemade eyeliner by poor women who fancied looking fashionable. Beauty and filth, inextricably linked. You trudge to the next house, your arms ache, your knees burn. Between jobs, the master hands you a crust of bread and a sip of water. "You're lucky," he says. "Back in my day, we got kicked for sneezing." You want to laugh, but end up coughing instead. By afternoon, the smell of burnt soot clings so deep it's part of you. Every pore tastes like coal. You scratch an itch on your arm and leave a black smear. You're more shadow than boy now. The next chimney is older, steeper. The bricks crumble when you press. Still, you climb. Halfway up, you realize the passage narrows too much. Your shoulders wedge tight. Panic claws at your throat. You twist, push. But the soot cakes behind you, pinning your ribs. "I'm stuck," you shout, though your voice comes out muffled. Below, the master curses, grabs a rope, and starts yanking your legs. It hurts. Your knees scrape raw, but the jolt loosens something. Air rushes past. You slide, tumble, crash into the hearth, and land in a heap. You're shaking, but alive. "See," the master says, good as new. You stare at him, chest heaving, too tired to answer. Historians still argue whether the death toll among sweeps was as high as reformers claimed. Some say thousands per decade, others insist fewer. Either way, the horror stories fueled public outrage and eventually reform. But reform, like soot, settles slowly. As dusk creeps in, the sky glows orange over the rooftops. You've cleaned 6 chimneys, maybe 7. Your clothes are stiff with grime, your skin gray. The master counts coins, then tosses you a copper. Buy yourself supper, he says, pocketing the rest. You want to protest but don't. A copper is a copper. You walk home through alleys glowing faintly with gaslight. Other sweeps pass, black-faced phantoms with hollow eyes. You nod to each other, unspoken kinship in every glance. A few older boys hum the old rhyme. When I climbs up, I gets downhearted. When I slides down, I gets up started. You join in, your voice rasping but steady. The sound echoes through the narrow streets until it fades beneath the hum of the city. Tomorrow, there'll be more chimneys, more soot, more pretending you're not afraid of dark spaces that can crush you. But tonight, you look up. The sky's a dusty violet, the first stars peeking through the haze. They look impossibly clean. You imagine them as other children, free, glowing, untouchable. Maybe one's watching you right now, a light that never has to crawl through filth to stay alive. You smile at the thought just before another cough steals it away. Still, you've survived another climb, and that, down here, feels like victory. You wake to the sound of rain slapping against the panes, the kind of thin gray drizzle that never really stops in towns like this. The room smells faintly of soap and boiled cabbage, which means you're still in the workhouse. Or rather, you belong to it now. The word workhouse sounds tidy, even noble. You imagine clean halls, order, maybe safety. Then reality cracks the illusion like a chipped bowl. The corridor outside your dormitory is long, bare, and echoing. Each footstep bounces off the stone walls. It's not home, it's storage. And you're the inventory. Here's your mainstream fact. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 created these institutions all over Britain. They were meant to provide shelter and food for the destitute, but only under the harshest conditions. Lawmakers believed the workhouse should be less comfortable than the poorest laborer's home, so that only the truly desperate would enter. Spoiler alert, plenty were desperate. You joined the line outside the dormitory. Everyone silent, heads down, gray uniforms, identical. The smell of damp wool and disinfectant clings to everything. At the end of the corridor, a matron waits with a ledger and a face like carved granite. She checks names with a pencil stub, then waves you toward the dining hall. The hall's long tables are scrubbed clean, but splintered. Tin bowls wait, steaming faintly. Breakfast, thin gruel, maybe a sliver of bread if you're lucky. You sit, spoon in hand. A boy beside you whispers, "Don't eat too fast. They count seconds." He's right. The matron's eyes sweep the room like a hawk's. The first one to finish is ordered to collect the bowls. The last one is accused of dawdling. There's no winning here, only surviving. You take your time, swallowing each spoonful like it's a secret. The taste is mostly salt and water. Your stomach growls anyway. It's grateful for anything that isn't soot. After breakfast, work begins. Children are divided into groups, boys to the workshop or the yard, girls to the laundry or kitchen. You end up in the oakum room, sitting before a mound of old rope. Your task? Pick apart the fibers with your fingers until they're loose enough to be reused for caulking ships. It's slow, numbing work, and your hands are raw within an hour. Here's your first joke of the day. Congratulations again. You've now graduated from chimney crawler to rope unraveler, a job description that doubles as a metaphor for your mental state. The air in the oakum room is thick with dust. You cough, flex your fingers, and glance at the overseer pacing behind the benches. He taps a cane against his leg, not in anger, just rhythm. You wonder if he does it to stay awake. He's as trapped as you are, only paid better for it. Historians still argue whether workhouses were cruel by design or simply by neglect. Some claim reformers sincerely believed discipline would build moral strength. Others say it was social punishment in disguise. Standing here, fingers bleeding from rope fibers, you know which version your skin believes. Hours blur. The only breaks come when the matron claps her hands and announces prayers. Everyone rises, murmurs the words, sits again. Faith here feels mechanical, like another task to complete. But still, you whisper along. Maybe someone up there listens, even to whispers. At midday, you're herded outside into the yard. Rain has stopped, but left puddles that mirror the gray sky. You huddle under the eaves, eating your portion of boiled potatoes and cabbage. It's hot enough to sting your tongue. Around you, children sit in small clusters, too tired to talk. A few laugh quietly, swapping crumbs or gossip. One girl tells a story about a boy who escaped last year. He hid in the laundry cart, she says, eyes wide. Made it all the way to the next parish before they caught him. You ask what happened when they did. She shrugs. They brought him back. The shrug says the rest, a quirky fact. Some workhouses experimented with early industrial education, teaching trades like shoemaking or weaving so inmates could earn their keep. But many just recycled labor, picking oakum, scrubbing floors, crushing bones for fertilizer. Yes, bones. Animal bones ground into dust for profit. You can almost hear the universe laughing at that irony. After the meal, back to work. Your hands ache, your back tightens, but your thoughts drift. You think of the streets outside, where at least there's noise, variety, choice. Here, even the hours sound identical. The clock ticks with smug precision, slicing the day into obedient pieces. You remember a teacher once telling you that time equals progress, maybe in his world. Here, time equals repetition, proof that you're still alive enough to work another hour. Late afternoon brings inspection. The overseer checks the piles of finished oakum, marks each with chalk. He pauses at yours, nods slightly, and moves on. You feel a ridiculous surge of pride, which fades just as fast when you realize what it's worth. Nothing. Still, pride's free. You keep it. Evening brings another meal, more gruel, slightly thicker. The matron reads a passage from the Bible about charity and humility, which feels like a joke no one's supposed to laugh at. Then it's prayers again, then bed. Your dormitory smells of wet wool and fatigue. Rows of narrow beds, each identical, each barely big enough to roll over in. You lie down, the blanket scratchy against your chin. Someone coughs in the next bed. Someone else whispers a lullaby in a language you don't know. The sound is strangely comforting. Historians still argue about what the workhouse did to the spirit. Did it break it or forge it? You don't have to guess. You feel the dull ache in your chest, the part of you that's stopped expecting kindness. But another part, small, stubborn, still hopes. Maybe tomorrow a letter comes, or a relative claims you, or the matron smiles just once. Hope's not banned here yet. You close your eyes and imagine the world beyond the walls. The city lights flickering like restless stars. The river sliding past the docks. The factories whispering smoke into the night. Somewhere, life continues without permission. Somewhere, children play without fear of ledgers or bells. You drift between sleep and thought. your body too tired to tell the difference. The workhouse hums around you, a breathing organism made of footsteps and sighs. For now, you're part of it. And outside, the rain starts again, soft and steady, washing soot from the roofs, washing stories down the gutters, washing everything that can't be scrubbed clean by human hands. You wake before dawn again, not because anyone rings a bell this time, but because the city itself does. It murmurs, growls, and clatters, even in sleep, a restless beast that never stops moving. The workhouse may have been its stomach, but the streets, these are its bloodstream. And this morning, you're one of the thousands of tiny cells rushing through. You slip out a side gate with a few other children. You're free for the day, though free means something different out here. Freedom tastes like soot, costs a penny, and disappears if a constable notices you standing still too long. You pull your cap low and step into the current of people. The air is already thick with the smells of early trade, frying onions, damp wood, horse dung, and the sharp tang of vinegar from the pickle cart. A man shouts about his fresh eels, another waves a broom made of twigs. The crowd doesn't listen. They've heard it all before. You join the noise with your own call, thin, high, and rehearsed. Matches, buy your fine matches. There's your first light joke. Nothing sells quite like desperation wrapped in rhyme. You weave through the throng, wooden tray strapped to your chest, its contents rattling with every step. A penny a box if you're lucky, half a penny if you're not. You keep one eye on the buyers and one on the constable with the heavy mustache. He's fond of sweeping street sellers away like crumbs from a table. Here's your mainstream fact. By the mid-19th century, Britain's streets were filled with what reformers called juvenile street traders. These included match sellers, flower girls, shoe blacks, and newsboys, children who worked long hours outdoors to scrape together a few coins, often supporting entire families. You sell your first box to a woman in a shawl. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't short you either. Small victories count. A boy nearby calls out, "Penny a song, latest from the music hall." He waves printed sheets of lyrics. You can hear him half singing the chorus of Champagne Charlie, though his voice cracks halfway through. People laugh, toss him coppers. Historians still argue whether these street trades offered independence or just disguised poverty with charm. You can feel the truth balanced right there in your palm. The coin's real, but it won't buy rest. By mid-morning, you've moved closer to the docks. The air thickens with smoke and fish. A sailor winks at you, tosses a farthing, and says, "For luck, lad." You pocket it, though luck feels like something you already spent. Nearby, two girls, one maybe your age, one smaller, sit plaiting fake flowers from paper scraps. Their fingers move fast, nimble from practice. One hums softly, and the tune drifts toward you like something remembered from a better life. Your quirky fact for this stretch: London had a brief craze for pure finders, people, often children, who collected dog dung from the streets to sell to tanneries for leather processing. It was a respectable trade. If you didn't have a nose, you count yourself lucky to be in the match business instead. By noon, the streets buzz hotter. You've sold nearly half your stock. Time for a break, if you can call it that. You find a spot near the steps of a church, sit down, and chew a crust of bread gone hard as wood. Around you, children dart in and out of the crowd like minnows, shouting about pins, apples, and papers. A newsboy waves the latest edition, something about a railway crash up north. The headline promises tragedy like it's entertainment. A woman in a fine hat pauses at the base of the church steps. She looks down at you, frowning, not cruelly, but like she's staring through glass at a display. She reaches into her purse, drops a coin, and says, "God bless." You mumble thanks, though you suspect he's already busy elsewhere. By late afternoon, the wind shifts. A drizzle starts, soaking your sleeves, turning the soot to mud. Business slows, so you try another hustle. You follow a man with a cart of coal and shout, "Mind your wheels, sir. Cobblestones are slick." Sometimes that earns you a coin. Sometimes it earns you a shove. Today, you get both. Historians still argue whether Victorian street children form proper gangs or just loose alliances. In truth, it's both. You know a few by name: the Dock Rats, the Mudlark Mob, the St. Giles crew. They protect each other when they can, and steal from each other when they must. Friendship's just another economy here. As dusk gathers, gas lamps hiss to life one by one. The rain stops, leaving the pavement glistening like oil. You count your earnings, 7 pennies and a farthing. Enough for supper and maybe a corner in a doss house if you're quick. The doss house sits off a narrow alley that smells like mildew and boiled cabbage. You hand over 4 pennies at the door. The keeper grunts and waves you toward a room where bodies already lie packed close, shoulder to shoulder. The air is thick with snores and smoke. You find a patch of floor, curl up, and tuck your cap under your head. But you don't sleep right away. Through a crack in the shutters, you can see the street outside, a cat darting across, a lamplighter extinguishing the last glow. You listen to the slow drip of rain from the gutters and the distant rattle of carriage wheels. You think about the workhouse, its silence, its rules, and how somehow the chaos of the street feels kinder. Here, at least, the city breathes with you, not over you. It's filthy and cruel and loud, yes, but it's alive, and you are too. You close your eyes, still smelling smoke, still hearing the echo of your own voice calling, "Matches! Buy your fine matches!" The rhythm lulls you more than the rain. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls 9. It's late enough to dream, early enough to hope tomorrow's weather holds dry. You turn on your side, hand closed around your 7 pennies, like they might hatch into something better overnight. And for the first time in days, you sleep without a wall, watching. Morning comes not with sunlight, but with a draft, a thin gray chill that snakes through the cracked window of the schoolroom. You blink yourself awake, cheek still pressed to the hard wooden desk. Chalk dust powders your sleeve. Your hand sticks to a half-finished slate sum. 7 times 6 equals something you don't remember finishing before you nod it off. The room smells faintly of coal smoke and soup. It's a familiar blend by now, half hunger, half hope. Welcome to the ragged school where charity is a chalkboard and education costs your gratitude. You straighten up as the teacher claps her hands. "Slates out, children," she calls, her voice brisk but not unkind. You obey, because this place, drafty, crowded, loud, is still better than the street outside. Here's your mainstream fact. Ragged schools were charitable institutions that spread through Britain in the mid-19th century, offering free basic education to poor children. They were named for the students' tattered clothes. Run by volunteers, missionaries, and reformers, they aimed to teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and morality in that order. You pick up your slate pencil. It squeaks as you scratch out numbers, your breath fogging the surface. The boy next to you, Alfie, cheats off your work with all the subtlety of a cat stealing cream. You glance at him and grin. He grins back, revealing a gap where two teeth used to live. The teacher turns, catching him mid-peak. "Alfred," she scolds, "your sums, not your neighbor's." Alfie blushes, shrugs, and pretends to concentrate. You suppress a laugh. Joke number 1 of the day: education's a noble calling until someone catches you dividing by imagination. After arithmetic comes reading. The teacher hands out thin pamphlets printed with sermons disguised as stories. Today's tale: the lazy boy and his sad fate. You try to follow along, but the letters blur. Your mind drifts instead to the soup pot simmering in the corner. The smell is faint but constant, the day's one promise of warmth. Historians still argue whether ragged schools genuinely educated children or simply pacified them with structure. Some say they were stepping stones to real opportunity. Others claim they trained obedience more than intellect. You suspect both might be true. After reading comes writing, on paper this time, though reused sheets mean half your letters fight with ghosts of previous sentences. "Remember," says the teacher, "good handwriting shows good character." You smile to yourself. If only she'd seen your handwriting after a 12-hour shift at the mill. A bell rings. Time for soup. The line forms fast, bowls clattering. You take your portion carefully, savoring the first mouthful. It's thin, more water than stew, but hot. You blow on it, steam fogging your face. The girl in front of you says, "If you close your eyes, it tastes like beef." You try it. It still tastes like cabbage, but you nod politely. Here's your quirky fact. Some ragged schools also offered soup kitchens, feeding students to entice attendance. Reformers discovered quickly that empty stomachs didn't memorize scripture well. In a few places, the soup lines drew half the neighborhood, proof that hunger was a better motivator than morality. After the meal, you file back to class for Scripture Hour. The teacher reads from a big Bible while children echo the verses in sing-song rhythm. "The meek shall inherit the earth," you chant. Alfie whispers, "Hope they've got boots down there," earning himself a glare from the older boy behind him. You smirk into your sleeve. When the lesson ends, the teacher gives a small talk on temperance and thrift. She holds up a shiny copper coin. "A penny saved," she says, "is a penny toward your better future." You glance down at your empty pockets. The future seems awfully far away. Still, you listen. Her words sound soft, measured. You can tell she believes them. Maybe she used to be poor too before she learned how to hold her back straight even when her shoes pinched. The door creaks open and a man in a tall hat steps in. Everyone stands automatically. The teacher beams. "Children, this is Mr. Calthorpe, our benefactor." He nods, surveys the room. His coat smells faintly of cigars and leather. He drops a few coins into a collection box and says, "I trust the little ones are learning industry and grace." The teacher answers yes, and the children nod on cue. You wonder if industry and grace can fit inside the same belly as hunger. Historians still argue about that too, in their own way, whether Victorian philanthropy truly helped the poor or just soothed the rich. After he leaves, the tension drains out of the room. The teacher sighs, sets the Bible aside, and says, "Right then, spelling. You write each word carefully. Coal, bread, chimney, work." The pencil's dull, but your focus sharpens. For once, your thoughts feel like yours. Afternoon brings singing. The piano's out of tune. The voices cracked, but together they sound like something close to joy. The melody fills the drafty hall, rising above the clatter of carriages outside. For a moment, you forget the cold floor beneath your shoes. The final bell rings just before dusk. You gather your slate and join the stream of children spilling into the street. The air bites at your face, sharp and clean after the smoky warmth inside. You walk with Alfie until the crossroads, where he peels off toward the docks. You pause by a shop window. Inside, a row of books gleams behind the glass. Bright covers, gold lettering. You imagine walking in, buying one, reading under real lamplight with no one hurrying you. Then you laugh softly. Dreaming's free, but it still costs time. As you turn away, you catch sight of your reflection in the window. A small figure, face smudged, eyes alert. Ragged, yes, but learning. That counts for something. You start down the street, the teacher's words echoing behind you. The meek shall inherit the earth. You grin. Maybe so. But until then, the quick and clever will borrow it on weekdays. The lamps hiss to life. Smoke drifts upward, blending with twilight. Your stomach's full enough, your hands smell faintly of chalk instead of soot. And for the first time in a while, the night ahead doesn't look entirely grim. You start the morning in someone else's kitchen. Not just any kitchen, mind you. This one could feed a small army if the mistress allowed more than decorative portions. The floor gleams from last night's scrubbing. The copper pots hang polished to blind the careless, and the air smells faintly of starch and cold gravy. You're in service now, part of a household that measures respect in silence. It's early, so early the lamps still flicker yellow. You move carefully, broom in hand, sweeping the flagstones under the watchful eye of the housekeeper. She's tall, gray-haired, and terrifyingly calm. Quiet hands, not quick ones, she reminds you. You nod, because that's the rule of every servant. Obey, don't echo. Here's your mainstream fact. During the Victorian era, domestic service was the largest employer of women and children in Britain. Millions worked as maids, errand boys, scullery girls, and footmen. For some, it was steady income and shelter. For most, it was endless hours, little sleep, and the feeling that you existed mostly to keep the silverware happy. Your day begins before the family's dreams do. You light fires in the grates, scrub the hallway, polish boots, fetch water, and whisper, "Yes, ma'am." So many times it starts sounding like your name. Upstairs, someone rings a bell, twice, sharply. The mistress wants tea. The bell system in the hall trembles, its little brass tongues jingling like chattering teeth. You check which one quivers. Drawing room. Always the drawing room. You rush up the back stairs, teapot balanced, heartbeat matching every creak of the boards. By the time you reach the door, your arms tremble, but you steady them. The mistress glances over her newspaper. Don't spill. You don't. She doesn't thank you either. That's the invisible art of service. You succeed only when unnoticed. When you return downstairs, the kitchen's alive. The cook barks orders like cannon fire. Onions, trays, and for heaven's sake, not that spoon again. You slip between the bustle, careful not to touch the shining brass that cost more than your year's wages. The cook's mood softens when you hand her the right ladle. "Good lad," she mutters. "Praise in this room is rarer than sugar." You scrub pots until your wrists ache. The copper gleams in the lamplight, distorting your reflection into something alien, part child, part ghost. Joke number one of the day. You've discovered the only mirror that doesn't flatter anyone. Historians still argue whether domestic service offered social mobility or disguised servitude. Some point out that loyal servants could rise to better posts or even manage households. Others remind us that most died without savings, their years spent polishing a comfort they'd never touch. Midday means errands. You carry baskets through the servants' entrance, across the street, into the butcher's shop. The air inside is metallic, sharp, but you're used to it. For Mrs. Fairley, you say. The butcher nods, wraps a cut in brown paper, and adds a wink. Tell her I've kept the best for her table. You don't mention that the servant's meal is whatever's left after the best becomes bones. Outside, rain begins again. You pull your cap low and hurry back, shoes slapping puddles. The city smells of coal and damp bread. You pass a group of street boys, one of them may be Alfie, calling out headlines. For a moment, you envy them, their noise, their laughter. Then you remember they'll sleep under a bridge tonight, and the envy fades into something softer, kinship, wrapped in distance. Back at the house, the afternoon shifts into quiet chaos. Bells ring in flurries, footsteps echo above. The master's coat needs brushing, the parlor curtains drawn. The dog walked. You're sent to carry coals to the study, the warmest room in the house. The master's there, spectacles glinting, surrounded by books. He doesn't see you at first. You move like smoke, refilling the grate. When he finally glances up, it's with faint surprise, like realizing the fire stokes itself. That's enough, he says. You bow and leave. Here's your quirky fact. Some wealthy Victorians installed hidden speaking tubes in their homes, allowing them to shout commands from one floor to another. Servants learned to recognize not just voices, but moods carried through brass. You're oddly grateful this house hasn't joined that trend. Bells are humiliating enough. Evening comes wrapped in heat and exhaustion. Dinner upstairs is a parade of clinking silver. Downstairs, you and the other servants eat quickly and quietly. Bread crusts, gravy scraps, maybe a potato if the cook's generous. Still, you laugh a little, trading stories in whispers. The scullery maid claims she once saw a ghost by the pantry door, a pale figure smelling of lavender. The footman jokes that it was probably the mistress herself, haunting her own reflection. Everyone snickers, but softly. Even rebellion's subdued here. Historians still argue whether servants truly loved the families they served or simply learned to mimic loyalty. The truth, as always, is muddled. You feel a strange mix of resentment and fondness toward the people upstairs, like distant relatives who never quite learn your name. Later, when the lamps dim, you carry ashes out to the yard. The air's cold and the stars look fragile above the smoke. You dump the ashes onto the growing heap and stand there a moment, rubbing your hands. Somewhere inside, the family laughs faintly, muffled through walls and glass. You wonder what they laugh at. Perhaps something trivial. Perhaps something you'll never understand. You slip back inside, past the silent hall, to your narrow bed beneath the stairs. The mattress smells of soap and damp stone. You lie there, boots still on, staring at the low ceiling. Every so often you hear footsteps overhead, the mistress crossing the room, the master shutting his study door. Their world moves above you, separate and heavy, but you feel its weight all the same. Before you drift off, you think about the bells on the wall downstairs, their tiny brass mouths ready to shout your name. You wonder if, in their dreams, they ever ring themselves. Probably not. That kind of magic belongs only to the overworked. You close your eyes, soot still under your nails, warmth lingering from the kitchen's fire. Another day gone, another piece of yourself polished, invisible. Tomorrow the bells will wake again, and so will you, and the house will hum its endless lullaby of labor and quiet obedience. At least, in that rhythm, you've learned to breathe. You wake to the sound of birds instead of bells. It's disorienting at first. The quiet feels too wide, too green. The city's clamor has been replaced by something slower, softer, the rustle of leaves, the creak of a wagon, the steady pulse of wind across open fields. You're in the countryside now, hired out for harvest season. The air smells of dew, hay, and possibility. Though not much breakfast, the farm is already alive when you step outside. Men hoist pitchforks, women tie kerchiefs over their hair, and children, lots of them, run barefoot through the rows. The horizon glows gold, a new sun rising behind a line of hedgerows. For once, the smoke in the air comes from cooking fires, not factories. Here's your mainstream fact. Throughout the 19th century, many poor families sent their children into agricultural labor, especially during summer and harvest months. Field work included bird scaring, stone picking, hop gathering, and gleaning, the collection of leftover grain after reaping. It was seasonal, grueling, and paid just enough to keep hunger a day away. Your task today is gleaning. You carry a sack and follow the adults into the fields, bending low to gather the stray stalks missed by the scythes. The wheat scratches your hands. The earth dampens your knees. The rhythm is simple but endless. Bend, pull, drop, repeat. A boy nearby, Tom, maybe 12, grins as he works. At least it's honest, he says. You nod. Honest? Yes, but not easy. Your back aches before the first hour ends. Still, there's something soothing in the repetition. The land breathes slower than the city, and for once you can match its pace. A skylark bursts upward, trilling madly. You pause, shielding your eyes to follow it. Don't stop, calls a woman further down the row. Sun waits for no one. You smile faintly and return to the grain. Joke number 1 for the morning. The sun's the worst boss of all, burns you, blinds you, and never takes a day off. By mid-morning, sweat slicks your neck, and your sack is half full. You rest a moment under a tree. The farmer's wife passes with a jug of water, her smile weary but kind. Small sips, she warns. You obey. The water tastes faintly of tin, but it's cold. Historians still argue whether child labor on farms was truly less cruel than in factories. Some point to fresh air and shorter seasons. Others note the same exhaustion, different scenery. You've done both, and honestly, your muscles don't care about the moral debate. After a while, you move on to another field. This one belongs to the hop growers. The tall wooden poles rise like spears, vines climbing toward the sun. You join a line of pickers, women, children, a few old men, all stripping hops into baskets. The scent is strange, sweet, bitter, sticky. By noon, your fingers are stained green and smell faintly of beer. Your quirky fact today: whole families once migrated from London to the countryside for hop-picking season, turning farms into temporary villages of tents and laughter. It was back-breaking labor, but also a rare holiday from city grime, a paradox the Victorians managed to perfect. Lunch is bread and cheese eaten in the shade. You lie on your back, staring at clouds drifting like lazy ships. A girl nearby hums a tune from a music hall song you half recognize. Someone laughs softly. Someone snores. It's the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones. Then the farmer's whistle blows, and the field wakes again. The work stretches long into the afternoon. You gather sheaves, haul baskets, chase birds from the corn. Your skin itches from straw, your hands sting from thorns. But there's pride in the sweat. When you look around, every face is streaked with dirt and sunlight. Everyone here looks equal under the same sky. As evening draws near, the last loads of grain roll toward the barn. The cart creaks, the horse snorts, and the smell of crushed straw fills the air. The farmer counts the sacks, nods, and flips a coin your way. "Fair day's work," he says. You catch it, surprised by the weight. A whole penny. It glints dull gold in the setting light. Historians still argue whether rural labor preserved older forms of community or simply delayed industrial hardships advance. The truth, you suspect, lies somewhere in the sound of the wagons, half progress, half echo. The sun sinks low, painting the fields orange. You walk back toward the cottages where workers sleep, low stone buildings smelling of smoke and bread. Someone's cooking stew, someone else tunes a fiddle. You follow the sound until it becomes music. Around the fire, people sit close, trading jokes and stories. You join them, legs crossed, bowl in hand. The stew's thin but hot. The laughter easy. Tom tells a tale about a scarecrow that came alive one night and asked for wages. Everyone chuckles. "It'd probably get 'em too," says the farmer's wife, "if it knew how to hold a pitchfork." Joke number 2 comes easy. You raise your bowl and say, "Here's to scarecrows, the only workers who don't complain." The laughter that follows feels real. Later, you slip outside to breathe the night air. The fields shimmer with moonlight, every blade of grass silver-tipped. You can hear crickets, a dog barking far away, the slow rhythm of the earth settling into sleep. It's strange how different quiet can sound out here. Gentle, forgiving, almost soft. You lie back on the cool grass, the penny coin still warm in your palm. You think of the factories, the workhouse, the chimneys. You think of this field, its labor, its peace. Somewhere in between the two lies survival, though no one's quite found the balance yet. Historians still argue whether the Industrial Revolution truly stole childhood from the countryside or just replaced one version of toil with another. You could tell them what it feels like, but they'd never understand the ache in your shoulders or the taste of fresh air after days underground. The moon drifts higher. You close your eyes, listening to the slow hum of insects and wind. For the first time in a long time, you sleep under open sky, and the earth, kind for once, lets you rest. You wake coughing. It's the kind that rattles in the ribs and clings long after you stop. The morning air, for all its supposed freshness, carries the same grit as the factory's breath, soot that settles even in your dreams. You sit up on your straw mattress, rub your chest, and listen to the city's lungs wheeze to life outside. Your cough isn't unique. Nearly every child in your street has one. Some call it the black phlegm, others the fog tickle. Whatever the name, it's the tax everyone pays for breathing where chimneys outnumber trees. Here's your mainstream fact. During the Victorian era, diseases like bronchitis, tuberculosis, and rickets were rampant among working-class children. Smog, cramped housing, and poor nutrition turned every cough into a gamble. Hospitals were few, doctors expensive, and self-medication was both common and creative, if sometimes lethal. You shuffle to the window. The glass is mottled with soot, turning daylight into a sickly amber. Below, women queue at a dispensary door, clutching bottles for cheap tonics. The smell of boiled linseed and vinegar seeps up even here. Downstairs, Someone stirs a pot over a weak fire. You catch the scent of onions and herbs, thin soup for thick air. Your mother, her hands red from washing, looks up as you enter. "Still coughing?" she asks, though the answer's obvious. She hands you a spoonful of something dark and sticky. "Treacle and lemon," she says, clears the pipes. You swallow. It burns sweetly, and you make a face. "Better than nothing," she says, with a faint smile. Joke number one for today. If Victorians had invented cough syrup ads, half the city could have been sponsored. She wraps a scarf around your neck and sends you to fetch coal from the yard. The cold bites and the smoke from the neighboring houses stings your eyes. You fill the bucket, hacking again as you straighten. The air feels heavier than the coal. Historians still argue whether the famous London pea soup fogs were more romantic myth or public health nightmare. You know the answer. On bad days, you could barely see your hand in front of your face. People carried lanterns at noon and coughed black into their handkerchiefs by night. You remember last winter how the fog thickened until even the lamplighters vanished. A boy named Eddie got lost on his way home and was found the next morning frozen by the canal. The newspapers called it a tragic accident. You call it what it was, the city eating its own. Later, you walk with your mother to the apothecary. The shelves glimmer with glass bottles, reds, greens, golds. The man behind the counter wears spectacles and a smug expression. "Something for the cough?" he asks. She nods, slides him a few coins. He measures a thick amber liquid into a bottle. "Laudanum," he says, "in small doses." You know what that means. Opium, the poor man's sleep. It dulls pain but steals more than it gives. Your quirky fact of the night. Laudanum was sold freely, even to children. Housewives used it to quiet babies, factory girls to calm nerves, and laborers to numb pain. The bottles came with ornate labels, their danger hidden behind pretty fonts. You leave the shop, the bottle wrapped in brown paper. The street outside thrums with life, hawkers, horses, coughing. You pass a penny doctor stall where a man in a shabby coat offers quick cures. "Miracle pills, cure for lungs, limbs, and love," he shouts. You wonder which hurts worst. Back home, you find your younger sister pale and wheezing under a blanket. The coughs found her, too. Your mother pours a spoonful of the new medicine and holds it out. She takes it without protest, then drifts into a heavy sleep. The room grows quiet except for the soft hiss of the fire. Historians still argue whether Victorian medicine marked progress or just new packaging for guesswork. Germ theory was still a whisper then, not gospel. Doctors debated whether miasma, bad air, caused disease, and few thought to wash their hands between patients. Progress takes time, but time wasn't something children had much of. By evening, your mother sends you to the market for bread. The sky glows orange from factory smoke, a sunset painted in ash. You walk past the corner chemist again, where a boy hawks bottles of Turlington's Balsam of Life. You almost laugh. Life in a bottle. Death in the fine print. You reach the baker's stall just before closing. The loaves are smaller now, prices higher. "Flour tax," the baker mutters. "Government gets fat while we get thin." You nod, pay, and tuck the warm loaf under your arm. Its heat seeps through your coat, a small kindness. On your way home, you stop at the riverbank. The Thames glints dull and oily, but it moves steadily, refusing to choke. You sit for a minute, eating the crust of bread, breathing through your scarf. The air tastes faintly metallic. You watch barges slip through the mist, silhouettes fading into smoke. You think about the doctor's bottle on your kitchen table, about the friends who vanished to sickness, about the endless cycle of coughing and surviving. There's a strange peace in the routine. The body learns to endure what the world refuses to fix. Your final joke for the night comes softly. If resilience were contagious, Victorians would have cured the world. When you return home, the room's dim. Your sister sleeps fitfully, curls damp with sweat. You sit beside her, humming the same lullaby your mother used to sing before workhouses, before smoke. The melody's worn thin, but it still works. Historians still argue whether children like you were victims or symbols, proof of suffering or proof of endurance. You're too tired to decide. You just keep humming, voice low, heart steady. Outside, the fog thickens again, wrapping the street in gray. Somewhere, a bell tolls slowly, marking another hour. Another day survived. You cough once more, softly this time, and lie down beside the fire. And though the air feels heavy, you drift into sleep like someone who's earned a moment of peace. The morning begins not with fog, but with talk, quiet at first, then spreading through alleys and workshops like rumor always does. New laws passed, someone says at the water pump. Factory hours cut for children. No more 14-hour days. You blink, half awake, unsure whether to laugh or believe it. The words sound too big to fit inside your morning. Here's your mainstream fact. By the mid-1800s, Britain began passing the Factory Acts, laws that limited children's working hours and set minimum ages. The 1833 Act restricted children under 13 to 48 hours a week. The 1844 Act lowered it further. Inspectors were appointed, though few and far between, and the mills quickly learned how to hide the smallest workers when they heard boots in the hall. You walk to work anyway. Habits don't vanish with legislation. The mill's gates look the same, the smoke just as thick. The overseer glances at his watch, mutters, "Half day," but his tone makes it sound like punishment. You and the others file inside, machines already spinning. Historians still argue whether those laws changed daily life or merely polished its cruelty. Enforcement was rare, factory owners clever. Some simply reclassified children as apprentices to skirt the rules. You can't help but smile at that. Even paperwork works overtime here. By noon, the whistle blows early. True enough, half day. You leave with pockets lighter than usual and time heavier than you remember having. The streets feel different, filled with children blinking in sunlight, like freed birds unsure how to fly. Some cheer, some scowl. Work at least kept them fed. You join a group outside a print shop where a poster flaps in the wind. Education for the working classes, attendance required. A man nearby shakes his head. First they take our hours, now they want our minds. Another laughs. Maybe they'll tax us for breathing next. You stand there, reading the words again. Attendance required. It sounds noble, but you know what it really means. One less wage in the family pot. Your mother's face flashes in your mind, already counting coins. Here's your first joke of the day. Parliament's new motto might as well be, "We've solved poverty by redefining it." Still, you're curious. You walk past the school later that week, peeking through the doorway. The teacher you remember from before smiles when she sees you. "Back again?" she says. You shrug. "Law says so." She hands you a slate anyway. Inside, the air feels different from the factories, quiet, heavy with dust and chalk instead of lint. The lesson's on geography. "This," she says, pointing at a map, is India. This is where the cotton comes from. You stare at the bright blue lines of rivers and ports. You've handled that cotton every day of your life, but never imagined the journey before it reached your hands. The world suddenly feels enormous. Historians still argue whether compulsory education truly liberated the poor or just trained them for different machines. But for you, this new rhythm, work some days, learn others, feels like a doorway cracked open. In the evenings, talk spreads again. Some parents grumble about lost income. Others dare to hope. Maybe our children will read contracts before they sign their lives away, one man mutters at the tavern. Another scoffs. Books won't fill bellies. You listen, quiet, because both sound right. At home, your mother studies your face as you copy words onto scrap paper by candlelight. You think this will change things? She asks softly. You look up, grin. Maybe not for me, maybe for someone else. She nods, half proud, half tired. That's the closest thing to a blessing she can give. Here's your quirky fact. The very inspectors sent to enforce factory reforms were often paid by the same government, anxious not to offend mill owners. Some rode through towns unannounced, others telegraphed ahead, giving foremen plenty of time to hide underage workers or bribe their way clean. Bureaucracy, the one profession with no minimum age. Weeks pass. The mill slows its hum. Sundays grow longer, and the idea of rest starts to mean something tangible. Churches host lectures about moral improvement. Reform societies print pamphlets titled The Future of the Child Worker. You flip through one at the library, tracing words that sound like prophecy. Every child deserves time to grow. It feels almost scandalous. Time to grow. You've been working since you could walk. Growth was something measured in inches between disasters. But as you read, a strange feeling stirs. Possibility, fragile as paper. Still, change never moves evenly. One evening, a neighbor bursts into your house, coat dripping with rain. They're closing the pit, he says. New law says no boys under 10. His voice is half fury, half disbelief. How's a man supposed to feed 6 mouths? Your mother doesn't answer. You all know the math too well. Historians still argue whether reformers underestimated the shock of their own kindness. Better laws often came without better wages, leaving families caught between virtue and starvation. The newspapers praised progress. The alleys whispered otherwise. Yet small miracles happened. You see fewer soot-blackened toddlers on the street corners now, fewer tiny shoulders under coal sacks. The world doesn't look kinder, but maybe it's pretending better. Sometimes pretending is the first step to truth. One evening you walk past the mill at sunset. Its chimneys still smoke, but quieter now, slower. You pause by the gate where you once stood trembling, afraid of the strap. The bricks glow gold in the fading light. For a moment, you almost forgive them. Then someone's laughter drifts from a nearby alley, a child's, high and effortless. It startles you with its brightness. You follow the sound and find 2 little girls skipping rope, their hair ribbons catching the light. No overseer, no clock. Just play. The sight feels almost dangerous, like witnessing a secret rebellion. You smile. Maybe that's what progress looks like. Small joys that no one bothers to outlaw. As the sky deepens into blue, you head home. The air smells faintly of rain and metal. In your pocket, a stub of chalk rattles, a souvenir from the day's lesson. You take it out, write on a brick wall as you pass. Less work, more world. It smudges under your fingers, but the words stay long enough for you to see them glow in the last light. Tomorrow, There'll still be smoke and hunger and noise. But tonight, for once, you can breathe without counting the cost. And in this small victory, half dream, half law, you find something resembling a future. Evening, and the city is stretching out after a long day. The factories have gone quiet, the market's emptied, and for once the air smells less like iron and more like damp stone and yeast from the nearby bakery. You're off work early, pockets holding a single copper and a handful of minutes before the world sleeps. And somehow that feels like wealth. You follow the laughter first, down the narrow street, past the lamplighter's ladder and the familiar cat curled on a doorstep. You find them, a swarm of children carving out a square of joy in the gutter. Chalk lines mark a hopscotch board. Skipping ropes slap the cobbles in steady rhythm. No adults shouting, no overseers counting, just the thin music of play. Here's your mainstream fact. By the late 19th century, even amid poverty, working-class children began reclaiming small scraps of leisure. The rise of half-day Saturdays, compulsory schooling, and public parks meant that, for the first time, play became visible, a quiet revolution of laughter in soot-streaked streets. You join the game without invitation. Someone tosses you a smooth pebble to use as a marker, and soon you're hopping along the chalk squares, pretending balance means freedom. For a few minutes, it actually does. When your foot slips and you stumble, the others cheer anyway. Winning isn't really the point. It's remembering you can lose without consequence. One boy suggests kickstone, half football, half chaos. You form teams using a flattened tin can as the ball. The first kick sends it clattering into a drain, and everyone groans in mock despair. "Fetch it," someone shouts. You do, of course, fishing it out with a stick and returning it like a hero. Joke number one. In the Victorian leagues of street football, every match ends in sudden drainage. The laughter echoes off the walls, blending with the distant rumble of carts. Somewhere, a window opens and a woman calls, "Keep it down." The game continues anyway. You grin. No law yet exists strong enough to stop momentum once it finds joy. When the game breaks for breath, you all crowd around a boy named Jimmy who has something new, a penny toy, freshly bought from the market. He winds it, a tin bird that flaps its wings with ridiculous determination. Everyone leans close, mesmerized. For a moment, the world feels bright enough to be absurd. Historians still argue whether these glimpses of fun counted as true leisure or just the illusion of escape. But to the children in this alley, philosophy doesn't matter. The game is the point, proof that a laugh can outlast hunger at least for an evening. You wander next toward the glow of the Penny Gaff, a makeshift theater squeezed between two shops. The sign outside promises laughter, music, and miracles, 1 penny entry. You hesitate. A whole penny's your supper, but curiosity's the stronger hunger tonight. You drop the coin in the tin cup and duck inside. The room smells of damp wood, paraffin, and excitement. A man in a battered top hat introduces the act, a comic skit about a clumsy constable. The audience howls. You find yourself laughing too, though your ribs still ache from work. The jokes are simple, the laughter contagious. When the show ends, you clap until your palms sting. Here's your quirky fact. Penny theaters and gaffs became the working-class alternative to the grand music halls of London. Performances featured acrobats, crude comedies, and cheap magic tricks. They offered something factories couldn't, a sense of belonging that didn't depend on wages. Outside again, night has deepened. Street lamps throw halos of amber over puddles. You walk with the others, still buzzing from laughter. Someone starts humming a tune, something half remembered from a church hymn, but faster, cheekier. Soon, everyone's humming. The sound spreads, blending with footsteps until it becomes rhythm itself. You pass a shop window displaying toys for the rich. Porcelain dolls, clockwork horses, picture books. The glass reflects your group. Ragged clothes, shining eyes, equal parts exhaustion and wonder. The contrast might sting if you weren't too busy laughing. Historians still argue whether the working poor envied the upper classes or simply built parallel worlds of joy. The truth probably lies somewhere between the two. Envy diluted by survival, pride hidden under soot. Back at the tenement, the fun doesn't quite end. Someone finds a candle stub, someone else a deck of battered cards. You sit in a circle on the floor, dealing with exaggerated seriousness. "Winner gets the biggest potato at supper," says Jemmy. Everyone nods solemnly, then bursts out laughing. The cards stick with grime, the candle flickers, and yet it feels like luxury. Joke number 2. In a city where half the adults bet on horse races, your group just invented the potato derby. Later, as the candle burns low, conversation drifts. Someone mentions the new school law. Someone else talks about a music hall that'll soon allow children inside for matinees. Hope, rumor, and wishful thinking mix like smoke. You listen, smiling, because for once the future sounds almost lighthearted. Eventually, yawns spread through the circle. The games fade, the laughter slows. You stretch out on the floorboards, arms under your head, eyes fixed on the ceiling cracks. Through the thin walls you can still hear faint echoes of laughter from the street. They rise and fall like waves. You think of the factories, the mines, the endless gray mornings, and how these scraps of night defy them. No machine can measure the worth of a laugh, and no law can tax imagination. Historians still argue whether play was rebellion or relief, whether these moments mattered in the grand ledger of progress. But you know what they never seem to mention, how soft the air feels right after laughter fades, when silence holds the echo like something precious. You close your eyes, smiling in the dark. Tomorrow will bring whistles and smoke again. But tonight, the world is briefly kind, and your dreams will smell faintly of chalk, laughter, and tin birds with flapping wings. Evening creeps into your one-room home like a polite intruder, soft at first, then everywhere at once. The light through the cracked window dims to brown, dust floating in its path like tired snow. The day's coins sit on the table, small, warm, insufficient. Your mother counts them twice, lips pressed tight. "Bread, candle, and rent," she murmurs. "No milk." You nod, because nodding is cheaper than hope. This is what home means now. One room for 5 souls. 3 beds that pretend to be 4, and walls that remember every cough. The air smells of cabbage boiled to surrender and the faint metallic tang of the chamber pot. Somewhere downstairs, someone's baby cries, a sound that never really stops, only changes ownership from night to night. Here's your mainstream fact. By the 1880s, overcrowded tenements packed entire families into single rooms across London, Manchester, and Glasgow. Disease thrived where privacy didn't exist. Rent ate half of every wage. Landlords stayed anonymous, and city planners looked the other way until epidemics forced their pens. You sit near the window, peeling the heel from a stale loaf. Outside, The street glows with oil lamps. Men shuffle home from factories. Women return from washing or sewing. Children chase the last bit of daylight between puddles. You can smell dinner from a neighbor's pot, onions and fat, and your stomach growls like a clock running down. Your mother ladles thin stew into bowls. The liquid gleams, transparent but warm. Eat slow, she says. You do. The taste is mostly salt, but it's steady. Joke number 1 of the night. If flavor were calories, you'd be the richest child in Britain. When supper's done, she folds what's left of the bread in cloth. For breakfast, she says. You don't ask whose breakfast. There won't be enough for everyone. The youngest gets it. That's the rule. Historians still argue whether working-class families of the era truly lost their domestic virtue, or whether they simply ran out of resources to perform it. Reformers wrote pamphlets on moral cleanliness while ignoring that soap cost more than meat. Your mother would laugh if she weren't so tired. You help tidy the room, pushing the wooden crate that serves as a table back under the window. The fire's embers blink like sleepy eyes. Your father sits by it, mending his boots with waxed thread. He doesn't talk much. His hands are steady, calloused, fingers built for fixing what never stays fixed. Across the room, your sister hums while patching a sleeve. The tune's old, maybe older than she is. For a moment, you forget how small the room is. The sound fills it, gentle and stubborn. You think, maybe love is just what happens between chores. Here's your quirky fact. Many tenement families wallpapered their homes with old newspapers, not just for insulation, but for decoration. Headlines became pattern. Politics turned to texture. If you look closely, you can still see last year's wars between the cracks. As night deepens, the room changes shape. Beds unfold from corners, mattresses shared. You lie between your siblings, shoulder to shoulder. The rhythm of breathing sinks into something almost musical. Outside, carriages clatter. Upstairs, a couple argues. In the alley, someone sings drunkenly off-key. Life in layers, none of them quiet. Your mother blows out the candle. Darkness folds over you like a second blanket. You stare at the ceiling stains, tracing shapes, faces, clouds, maybe even continents if you squint. The imagination's a fine escape, especially when geography costs nothing. Historians still argue whether children from slums truly dreamed differently, shaped by confinement, or whether all children dream the same until the world teaches them boundaries. You'd argue the former. You've learned that dreams here need to be small enough to fit through narrow windows. Your father coughs. The sound echoes against the wall, swallowed quickly. You wonder if he'll be strong enough for next week's shift. The factory doesn't keep men who slow down. None of them do. You reach for your sister's hand under the blanket, a quiet agreement. Still here, still trying. She squeezes back once, a tiny pulse of reassurance in the dark. Joke number 2 slips from your mouth before you can stop it. Think we'll ever be rich enough to afford separate beds? She snorts softly. What would we do with all that space? You both chuckle, then drift toward sleep. The walls creak. Somewhere, water drips. The city breathes around you, slow and uneven. And you, pressed between hunger and warmth, begin to drift. Historians still argue whether progress really began at Parliament or in rooms like this, where exhaustion invented ingenuity, where families rewrote survival each night. The records talk about policies, but you know it's the tiny gestures, the shared crust, the mended boot, the held hand that built endurance. Outside, rain starts against the roof. It sounds like someone sweeping the sky clean. You imagine it carrying soot into gutters, leaving behind streets that might look silver come morning. You know better, but you keep imagining anyway. Tomorrow will start with smoke again, with whistles, with counting pennies. But right now, the room is still, and the world outside feels briefly manageable, shrunk to 4 walls and 5 heartbeats. And as the rain continues its quiet percussion, you let your eyes close, whispering a small prayer not for riches or rescue, but for morning to come gently. Morning again, gray and damp as always. You stretch, bones creaking like the floorboards, and glance toward the single patch of sky visible through the cracked window. It's pale and hesitant, a reluctant sun fighting its way through smoke. You're older now, old enough to notice that the world keeps talking about change while somehow staying exactly the same. Today, though, you're not working. You've borrowed a coat, a pencil stub, and a reason. You're meeting the man from the newspaper. He collects stories, or so they say, accounts, testimonies, words for what ordinary people see but rarely record. He wants to hear about your childhood. You almost laugh at the idea of remembering it like something past. Here's your mainstream fact. By the 1840s and onward, reformers and journalists began publishing first-hand accounts of child labor, letters, sketches, and interviews that shocked polite society. Henry Mayhew's London Labor and the London Poor captured the voices of working children, while campaigners like Lord Shaftesbury used testimonies to push Parliament toward reform. For once, ink began to fight soot. You meet the journalist at a cafe near the docks, a place smelling of coffee grounds and damp newspapers. He's thin, pale, wrapped in a long coat that's seen better winters. "Sit," he says, gesturing to a chair. You do, clutching your cap. He opens a notebook already half filled with other people's sorrows. "So," he begins, "you've worked in factories?" You nod. "And mines and service," you add. His eyebrows rise slightly. "All before 15? Before 12, you correct. He whistles softly. He asks questions. How long were the hours? How strict the masters? How many times you were struck for falling asleep? You answer as best you can, though words feel smaller than memories. You try to describe the heat, the noise, the air that shredded your lungs, but language refuses to match the weight of it. When you pause, he scribbles furiously, ink blotting like bruises. "This will help," he says, though his tone sounds unsure. "People need to see." You glance out the window where a chimney pokes through the mist. "They already see," you say quietly. "They just don't look." Joke number 1. Historians of the future might call this the golden age of reform, but from where you sit, it's mostly just the age of paperwork. He smiles at that, half amused, half ashamed. "Maybe," he says, "but words can open doors." You nod, though you've learned that doors, once open, often lead to the same corridors. Still, you talk, because silence helps no one. Historians still argue whether reformers exploited the poor's pain or amplified it for change. Some accuse Mayhew and others of turning misery into spectacle. Others insist they gave the voiceless their first echo. You suspect both are true. Pity is rarely pure. After an hour, the journalist closes his notebook. "You've seen too much," he murmurs, "and remembered more than most men twice your age." You shrug. "We all see too much. Some of us just don't have time to talk about it." He presses a coin into your palm. Payment, maybe, or apology. You nod your thanks, and leave. Outside, the wind off the river bites through your coat. You walk toward the printing presses, drawn by the low thunder of their turning wheels. Through a doorway, you glimpse sheets of fresh news tumbling out, headlines shouting about reform, empire, progress. You wonder if your story will appear there tomorrow, your name replaced by anonymous, your words polished until they sound like fiction. Maybe that's fine. If a lie saves a child, it's worth more than the truth that keeps them in chains. Here's your quirky fact. Some reformers used fiction deliberately to sway public opinion. Novels like Oliver Twist and Mary Barton weren't pure invention. They were moral mirrors, forcing readers to see what they'd stepped over in the streets. Charles Dickens himself once visited a workhouse to confirm every grim detail before he wrote it down. That evening, you find yourself drawn to the cheap bookstall by the bridge. The vendor, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, greets you with a grin. "Looking for stories, are you?" he says. You scan the titles, pamphlets about reform, poetry about progress, love tales that promise endings better than real ones. You pick one with a woodcut on the cover, a boy sweeping a chimney, face half hidden by smoke. "2 farthings, the man says. You hand him the coin the journalist gave you and tuck the book into your coat. Fair trade, you think, one story for another. Back home, you read by candlelight. The words move clumsily, printed in cheap ink, but they strike something deep. The boy in the story escapes, finds kindness, grows into a teacher. You smile at the improbability. Yet for all its make-believe, the story feels like oxygen, thin, precious, necessary. Historians still argue whether narratives like these truly changed policy or just soothed guilt, maybe both. But you know what they did change: the silence. Once you speak a truth aloud, even prettied up in ink, the world can't quite unhear it. You close the booklet, tuck it under your pillow, and lie back. Outside, the presses keep thundering, churning out tomorrow's versions of today. You imagine your words flying somewhere among them, landing in parlors far away, making someone pause between bites of dinner. Maybe they'll frown. Maybe they'll forget. But maybe, just maybe, they'll care. You smile at the thought. The city hums, relentless as ever. But tonight, it hums in harmony with your heartbeat. You've become part of its voice. And as you drift toward sleep, soot-stained but unbroken, you realize something rare. Sometimes the smallest story can make even history listen. Night in the city again, but softer this time. The gas lamps blur in a thin fog, halos trembling in the cool air. You walk slowly, no destination, only a sense that the streets are leading you somewhere quieter than they used to be. Horses clop distantly, the river murmurs below the bridges, and for once the smoke smells faintly sweet, like coal learning to forgive itself. You pass the mill first, its gates closed, the yard empty. The chimneys still pierce the sky, but no longer with the fury you remember. Inside, machines stand still for Sunday maintenance, their silence louder than their roar. You stop and touch the gate, metal cold under your fingers. Once, this place owned your hours. Now, it feels almost polite. Here's your mainstream fact. By the end of the 19th century, reforms had reshaped industrial Britain. Shorter hours, safer machines, and compulsory schooling gradually thinned the ranks of child workers. By 1900, the sight of small hands at factory looms had become the exception, not the rule. Progress, slow and uneven, but real. You keep walking, past the school you once slipped in and out of, past the church whose soup tasted more of charity than broth. The windows are dark now, but you can almost hear the echoes, chalk, squeaks, whispered prayers, small laughter. The ghost of learning lingers pleasantly in the air. You take a turn toward the river. The cobbles glisten with evening rain, reflecting the wavering light like broken mirrors. At a corner, a girl sells paper flowers. 2 for a penny, she calls. You smile and buy one, tucking it into your coat. She grins, a gap-toothed, honest grin, and for a moment you see yourself in her, years ago, shouting about matches in the same streets. The past, it seems, doesn't vanish. It just changes clothes. Historians still argue whether the reforms of that era were driven by compassion or convenience, whether lawmakers acted out of conscience or fear of unrest. You no longer care which is true. Good intentions matter less than the children who finally got to sleep past dawn. You wander toward the docks, where ships rest like tired beasts tethered to the wharf. Cranes creak softly in the wind. Men unload crates from faraway places. India, the Americas, the colonies that built the empire's appetite. You stand watching, realizing that every thread you once spun in the mill had a story longer than you could have imagined. The world is wide, and you've touched it, even if it never learned your name. Your quirky fact of the night: Queen Victoria herself once toured a textile factory incognito to see how children were treated. She wept afterward, or so the papers claimed. Whether she cried for the children or for the empire's conscience remains an open question. You smile faintly, imagining the queen in your mill, skirts trailing in oil, eyes wide at the noise. Maybe she'd have lasted 5 minutes before the soot conquered her perfume. You reach the end of the pier and lean against the railing. The Thames rolls darkly below, steady as memory. Across the water, lights flicker in neat rows. New houses for clerks and craftsmen, families with fewer bruises and more choices. The world hasn't healed, but it's learned to limp with dignity. Behind you, footsteps echo. A group of boys run past, laughing, chasing a hoop that clatters against the stones. None of them wear rags. None of them look hungry. You watch them go, heart swelling with something strange and warm. Pride, maybe. Relief. You never thought laughter could sound like evidence, but here it is. Historians still argue whether the industrial age was tragedy or triumph. But for you, it's become memory. One you carry like a scar that doesn't hurt anymore, only reminds you where you began. You turn toward home. The city hums low, a lullaby of carriages, boots, and faraway whistles. You pass tenements with curtains drawn, light glowing from within. You picture families eating in peace, children reading by candlelight, small miracles stacked like bricks. And now, slowly, let's begin to wind down. The air cools, each breath gentler than the last. The fog drifts low, muffling the city's edges until everything softens. Rooftops, lamplight, even the moon. You walk slower, footsteps light. The cobblestones beneath you feel familiar, forgiving. You think of everyone you've met along the way, the boys in the mines, the girls in the mills, the street singers, the scullery maids, the sweepers, the scholars, the dreamers. Their voices weave together in your mind, hundreds of small, tired stories forming one long sigh of endurance. You realize you've been walking with them all along,